Hey guys, thanks for joining me. About a year and a half ago, I did a video on how to kind of DIY your own power station. And it was basically kind of a simplified version of this thing right up here with a few less bits and pieces. And I think that today is actually still like maybe my second most viewed video. It's got quite a bit of views on it. So clearly there's a lot of interest out there in DIYing your own kind of power station. Now, why might you want to do that? Well, the first reason is you're probably going to save a little bit of money, maybe a lot of money, depending on how you do it. But you can plan exactly what you need to build, and then you can swap out, maybe build it with the particular capacity that is right for you, and you can change it out as you go along. Well, I'm guessing that a large number of people who watch that video never take the next step and actually kind of do the actual DIY. They're just kind of curious to see how it works, and maybe they're still a little bit intimidated. But what if I told you there was actually a way to DIY your own power station that is dramatically more simple? Check this thing out. So this is the very creatively named battery box from a company called Licitti. And basically it's a box without a battery that you put a battery in, but it contains everything else. It's got a 1000 watt inverter. It's got multiple DC outputs here. It's got a 12 volt 10 amp car socket right there. And then it's got a couple of Type C PD USB ports and a couple of Type A quick charge ports over here. It's got a main disconnect switch for the battery. This is where you turn the inverter on. And then over here on the side, it's got a bunch of, believe it or not, these are Anderson power pole connectors. Now, normally when we think of Anderson connectors, we're usually thinking of something like that, right? With a little red and black connector on it. But these are also Anderson connectors. Now the big difference is this small one, which we often see in power stations, is rated for somewhere between 15 and 45 amps max, kind of depending on the gauge of wire that you have connected to it. But these connectors up here, these are Anderson power poles as well. They're just larger. These are designed for up to 50 amp connections. And in fact, there's 3 50 input-output connections up here, and then there's one that is a 10 amp connector. It's the same connector, but it's designed specifically for solar input, and it has a maximum of 45 volts. So when you hook a solar panel up to this, you just have to make sure it does not exceed 45 volts for the MPPT charge controller that is built into this. And then over here you've got actually a 175 amp power pole connector, and this is actually designed to, they say, to jumpstart your car. It actually comes with the big old cable here. Now this is really not for jumping your car, because this is the 50 amp connector. This would be for like charging your car battery is what you would use these for, not jumping your car, because there's just not enough amperage here to actually cold crank that car. And then it also comes with another cable here that you would plug into the solar connection. Yeah, so this allows you to hook it up to pretty much any kind of standard solar panel that has either native MC4 outputs or has an adapter to MC4. So it could be a portable solar panel or a rigid solar panel. Just as long, like I said, as you don't exceed that 45 volt cap on the charge controller. Now it also does come with a little baggie that's got basically a little tie-down strap and some brackets that you can install. This would be great for an RV installation or a boat installation where you want to be able to strap this thing down so it's not hopping around. As you can see here, it's got kind of a little groove indentation to keep the thing all kind of locked up tight. It does have a couple of ventilation fans on it, one intake and one outtake. Over here is the other one. I'm not really sure which one is which, but it doesn't really matter. And you've got one AC port. I'm not sure if this is 110 volts or 120 volts. Now, when we look inside of this thing, if I pull the lid up, this is where all the guts are pre-wired for you. And they did a really nice job in here. Everything's tied down really nice. They've got covered boots on the contacts. This says, this is the AC inverter, by the way. It says that it's 120 volts, but we're going to check that and see. And then, of course, you got your solar charge controller right here, and it is an MPPT charge controller, not a PWM charge controller. So that's basically the guts. Now, all we got to do to connect this thing up is put a battery on the inside, and there's a little tie-down strap for the battery as well. You can see this is a pretty cavernous space here, right? Container. You can put a pretty good-sized battery. In fact, Licitti's manual, which does obviously come with a battery box manual as well. The manual says that if you're using lithium iron phosphate, you should be able to get something in the neighborhood of 200 amp hours into this box. Now that's 200 amp hours on a 12 volt system. I mean, that's 20, almost 2,500 watt hours, or actually slightly over 2,500 watt hours. That's a lot of capacity in this small box. It will certainly handle kind of the standard size. This happens to be the Time USB 100 amp hour. Certainly handle something this size, no problem. And then it would also, then you could also put something like this in there too. This is the Li Time or Lithium Time 100 amp hour mini. And this will have actually a bunch of extra space. If you put something like this in there, the manual does tell you to sort of take up some of that extra space with foam, so it's just not knocking around in there. I'm actually going to use this in there, and I'm going to use that specifically since there's no like monitoring on this to tell me, like for example, what my actual state of charge is. It really just shows you the voltage on the display, but that doesn't really tell you much on a lithium ion or lithium iron phosphate battery in terms of its actual state of charge. For that, I need to actually monitor the energy consumption going in and out, and I'm going to use this little smart shunt from Victron on that so that I can monitor that. And I can also use this to sort of calculate the no-load draw on that AC inverter, so we can find out how much parasitic draw there is if you accidentally leave the AC inverter on. We'll also be able to get a sense for how much solar we're getting into this, because I don't believe the display on the lid will actually show how much solar we're getting into this. But all I need to do is add a small battery like this, and that's what makes something like this battery box super attractive for the DIYer, because if I ever want to change the battery out, it's super easy to do. All I got to do is open the lid, pull the two connections, swap the batteries, and I'm good to go. So yeah, there's a lot to like about this. So let's find out what the limitations are, find out what the performance characteristics are. We're not going to worry about capacity so much, because really that's just a function of the battery, not a function of the battery box. All right, so let's put this thing together and see what we can do with it. Man, so you can see just how much room there is in here with one of these minis. There's a lot of extra room. By the way, if you're curious what the size on this is, let's go ahead and measure that. Probably from here to there. So from this inside corner to that is 13¼ inches. And it does look like it's straight down. It doesn't taper. Now in terms of width, let's call that just a hair over 8½. So maybe 8 5/8. And then in terms of depth, but I would call it about 9½ inches to the top of the case. So you'd have to work within those dimensions. And I do. Okay, I can see the blue light flashing. All right, got all my connections here. You can see I've recalibrated the battery since I just recharged it. So we are at 100% state of charge. We got no power coming in or out of it. So I'll be able to monitor it using this app, which is really nice. So let me go ahead and button this thing back up. Now normally you would put foam in there to keep it from moving around, but I'm not going to do that. All right, let's turn this thing on and see what happens here. All right, that's the battery, which means that I should be able to turn on these USB ports here. And these are individually powered with this little power switch. So we do have 12 volt power. Let's try the AC inverter and push it in all the way. So it looks like 122 volts. Let me put my watt meter in here on the side and let's just see what we got here. All right, as you can see, we are reading 122 volts. All right, as you can see, I got a little space heater here. Let me go ahead and power that up. And you can see my voltage has dropped now to 116, 117 volts, which is normal under load. And you can see here on my Smart Shunt app, we're pulling about just under 20 amps, 260 watts. That'll actually settle down closer to 200 watts. All right, so things are definitely working. Let me go ahead and shut that off. I'm going to leave the AC inverter on, and you can see we're pulling right now only about 5 watts and maybe not even quite half an amp, so 0.37 amps through that Smart Shunt. So yeah, 5 watts, it's pretty low power draw for that 1000 watt AC inverter. Let's see what that translates to in terms of state of charge. when we come back in the morning and check on this. So it is 7:36 p.m. We'll check back on it in, I don't know, something over 12 hours, and we'll find out where we are and how much power we actually ended up consuming through that AC inverter, through that no-load draw. All right. We are actually about 11, almost 11 a.m. the next day, so call it 15 and a half hours, and we are only down by 5% capacity on this 1280 watt-hour battery. And we're still pulling about 5 watts, so that would be 5 watt-hours because it's pretty continuous. And yeah, the math does work out. It's basically a 5% over a 15 and a half hour period. Yeah, so pretty efficient 1,000 watt AC inverter. And so I guess let's make sure we can pull 1,000 watts out of it. All right, as you can see, I'm pulling just south of 1,000 watts, so 966 watts. Seems to be going just fine. Let's hear the fans. So right up on it, we're just over 60 decibels. And a couple feet away, we are 10 decibels lower at just over 50 decibels. So that's actually a pretty nice, quiet white noise. All right, let's see if we can sustain this for 10 full minutes. Start the timer. All right, definitely past 10 minutes. In fact, if you look at the timer up on top of my watt meter, this is when I actually started applying the load. We're almost at 15 minutes, so a little over 14 minutes. So definitely handles running at 900 plus watts. We eventually dropped down. It's mostly because this little space heater here settles down. So even though we were starting in the high 900s, we settled down into the kind of the mid 900s. But yeah, definitely it seems like this 1,000 watt inverter does live up to spec. Let's try some other tests and see what we can get away with. Let's see if we can connect a 12 volt charger using one of these 50 amp inputs. And what I'm going to do is use the cable that came with it, with these clamps, and I'm just going to attach these clamps to the clamps on the battery charger to see if I can charge this easily externally just using a standard 12 volt battery charger. All right, so first I'm going to go ahead and put the connector on. And before I connect the charger, I'm going to go ahead and carefully connect the alligator clips to each other. Hopefully this works. I'm not sure I recommend this, but in theory it should work fine. Hopefully we're making a decent connection there. All right, turn the battery back on, plug the charger in, and let's see what happens. The charger's definitely charging, or it wouldn't be running like that. And if we look at the smart shunt, you can see we are pushing in just about 18 amps, 238 watts. That should be pretty continuous. Let me try hooking the solar back in and see if we see that 239 watts jump just a little. It's not going to jump much since the solar is pretty low. And we'll see if we can charge via DC and direct, and also, yeah, so it's starting to tick up. 251 watts, 252. So you can solar charge and you can DC charge through an AC charger, battery charger at the same time. That does work. And just out of curiosity, let's find out if we can run an AC load while we're charging. And we do have power to the little mini space heater. You can see our net watts here is now going into the negative because we are actually pulling more power out of the heater than we are inputting through the charger and the solar. Yeah, so that definitely does work. Pass-through charging confirmed. All right, let's see what happens if we push this thing over 1,000 watts. Like we are at 629 right now. Let me add some more load and see what it does. All right, immediately we get overload message. Let's see, the inverter should shut us down, and it did. Okay, Yeah, so that makes sense. We were actually throwing something in the neighborhood of 1200 watts at it or so. Yeah, the AC inverter did its job and shut itself off as it should have. So yeah, you're not going to have a lot of headroom on something like this in terms of exceeding that 1000 watts. But it does give you a little bit about, I would say, 10 seconds worth of notice that you're exceeding. Then it shuts you down. So that's what it should do for safety purposes. So yeah, this thing is pretty cool. Now, there are a couple of things that you'd probably want to be aware of when you're considering this kind of solution. I did discover that despite the 45 watt input max on the built-in solar charge controller, it does seem that the maximum total solar input caps out at somewhere around 150 watts, which will get you to only about 50% stated charge on a typical 100 amp hour battery in a full day of sunny sky conditions. Now, there is actually a workaround option where you could connect a larger solar controller, maybe something, like this Bouge RV Sunflow 30 amp version, which would allow you to connect up to 450 watts at 12 volts and then fully charge a 100 amp hour battery in about a half a day of full sun. And you'd connect that primarily through one of these 3 gray ports, these 50 amp ports right here, not the black solar connector up there. It'd also be nice if the display on the front of the battery box could show you things like an accurate state of charge, for example, rather than just the voltage and how much power you're getting into the battery during charging. So if having that kind of information is something that you would actually want to see, you kind of have to add a battery monitor like I was using during testing. And as it turns out, Licitti actually does sell their own version of that battery monitor, and their version comes with an external color LCD display module as well as mobile app control, and it still somehow manages to be quite a bit less expensive than the one I was using. Okay, let's talk about pricing. In this particular AC battery box version, you have a couple of different options. You can actually order it with or without a 20 amp AC to DC charger. Without that charger, it's only $168, and with the 20 amp charger, it's just a little more expensive at $213. Now, that's only $45 more expensive, which is actually a pretty good deal to get it that way, because if you buy a 20 amp charger on Amazon separately, it's going to run you somewhere between 80 and 120 bucks, depending on which one you buy. Plus, Licitti's charger actually comes with that big 50 amp Anderson connector on it already, and it's much more quick and easy to connect it to the battery box versus trying to clamp a couple of these alligator style connectors together. Oh, and Licitti did provide me with a discount code that you can use on their website at checkout to get the price down even further. And some welcome news for those of you who are located outside the US in countries like the UK or Canada or Germany. Licitti does have distribution in those regions as well, and the discount code that they gave me should work for you as well, not just the US viewers. And as per usual, you can find the discount code and the link to Licitti's website down in the video description below if you're interested in checking it out. So given the fall in prices on 100 amp hour 12 volt lithium iron phosphate batteries over the past couple of years, you can now get them for, as I said in the beginning, somewhere around $200 or so, maybe a little bit more than that. And the AC battery box from Licitti is basically letting you easily build a 1000 watt 1280 watt hour power station for around $415, or just 32 cents a watt hour, which is about as cheaply as you're going to be able to DIY something like this, even if you were to go and spec out all the components yourself and try to retrofit it all into a cheap Harbor Freight toolbox or ammo can or something. But this takes a heck of a lot less time and effort. So yeah, I'm pretty impressed with this solution, and I'd say if you tend to lean towards the DIY side of things and you're looking for an easy and inexpensive and quick solution that's still portable, this AC battery box from Licitti is certainly worth checking out. Hey, by the way, if you're wondering what kinds of things you can run with a particular power station, maybe the one we just talked about, or how long that power station can run those items, I do have a Google spreadsheet that I'll link to in the video description below. And be aware that it is kind of a work in progress, but I do update it with new information as I'm able to collect it. Now, I've got it sorted here starting right out based on average continuous watts, but you can also type in a particular power station's rated battery capacity and the rated continuous AC inverter output numbers. And the spreadsheet will put a green highlight on all of the items that the unit can power, at least individually, and a red highlight on the things that it cannot power. It'll also calculate an estimated runtime value representing either the number of hours or cycles that a particular device can be run on a power station with the rated capacity that you keyed in. So be sure to check out that link below in the video description if you think that information might be helpful to you. And hey, if you do want to contribute device information to the spreadsheet, just put a comment in the video below listing the device and how much power that device requires, and I'll try to add it to the spreadsheet so other people can benefit from that information. Okay, I think that's a wrap. I do hope you found at least something helpful in the video. If you did, please consider clicking on the like button for me. I'd really appreciate that. And if you're not already a subscriber, well, maybe consider subscribing as well. I do offer my sincere thanks for stopping by and watching this video with me, and I hope you'll consider joining me for the next one. Until then, have fun out there.